All right, so I am here with my friend and colleague, Nicholas. Nicholas, hi, thank you for taking your time out today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I just realized I left my coffee in the house, so this is going to be a decaffeinated podcast interview, which is totally fine.
Oh dear.
I'll be okay. I'll be okay. We'll all be okay. So, folks, for those of you that are joining us, I wanted to introduce my friend and colleague Nicholas. Nicholas DiCarlo, LCSW, pronouns they, them, is an analytic social worker. At UCSF, they co direct the Emancipatory Sciences Lab, and in New York, they teach at the Silberman School of Social Work and the National Institute of the Psychotherapies. They co-edit the Rutledge series Aging in Society with Dr. Carol Estes, and they're currently working on something called Crone Pedagogies, which I love that title, looking at transformative intergenerational learning experiences and abolitionism. All of which is to say that Nicholas is awfully smart, and they are awfully creative, and they are doing awfully serious work. And we're not necessarily going to explicitly talk about that today. Today we are for the birds, because when Nicholas and I were meeting and working and bonding together this summer, we had the opportunity to speak about a few things. And one of the things that I was really struck talking with you about, Nicholas, was birds. And I'm going to let you actually take it from here, because it turns out that you've got quite a fondness for birds.
Yeah, it sort of came out of nowhere, and I saw a meme that this is sort of how birders become. Like one day you're just suddenly a birder. And I guess like the first important moment, um, for years a friend and I would take pictures of like baby bird corpses on the sidewalk and send them to each other. Um, like just to kind of like, a little memento, like honor the bird's life, and our very like kind of like dark sense of humor. Um, that like there's kind of death all around us that we're encouraged to just like step over and ignore. But back in June, I was walking with my dog and I saw a little bird on the ground and it wasn't dead. And it was definitely a nestling. It didn't have many feathers and it just looked so sad. So I scooped it up and looked into what you can do with a baby bird in New York City. And basically, you shouldn't do anything with them except take them to the Wild Bird Fund, which is on 87th and Columbus. And don't try to give it water. Don't try to feed it. Just get it to the bird fund. Um, and it was just sort of like a nice adventure in the city because I was down on the train tracks with my bird in a box, and I saw this woman coming down the stairs, and she had a glove and also was holding a cardboard box. And like it's like 8:30 in the morning at our subway stop, and I'm like, "Do you have a bird in that box?" And she was like, "I do." She was Swedish, so if I do her voice, I'm gonna try to do a Swedish accent. And we rode down together, and she'd done it quite a few times. And she was very anxious and kept asking me if she had done the right thing, if the bird's mom was going to come home. Questions that like I really don't have answers for. And it turned out she's also a therapist, so it felt like we were just off for like a kind of like wild ride. Um, and that bird died because they give you this like really nice like standard email when the bird dies that is like, thank you so much. We're so sorry to tell you. But your efforts at least let the bird die with some dignity. Um, anyway, so that kind of transformed my relationship with birds in the neighborhood. Just being curious about like what their lives are, how they construct homes, and a lot of the scaffolding that plagues the city. And also like where I am in Washington Heights, like some of the last natural forests of Manhattan exist. And there's a ton of migratory bird species that come. So my husband found a birding group that met, and we went to that, which is its own kind of like wild adventure. Um, and just recently, I came across this poor little pigeon, and it was looking up at the sky like it wanted to go up, but it just couldn't figure out how to get there. And it was kind of dirty, and pigeons are pretty good at like cleaning themselves. Um,
I did not know that.
I might have just made that up. Um, but I think they're pretty like regal birds. They're really intelligent. They can recognize every letter of the alphabet. They can like know you by your face. A friend that I met during Hurricane Sandy had actually rescued a baby pigeon um, from its like early days and had like chewed up like nuts and spit it through a straw and like, you know, had taught this bird to fly and then had like soft released it. So as I became friends with this person, I also became friends with Hoo Hoo. Um, we'd have Sunday morning coffee, and Hoo Hoo would like come to the window and come in, and then like wrestle in David's like the nook of David's knuckles, like very sweet. So I've always liked pigeons, but that just like sealed the deal. Anyway, yeah, a couple weeks ago, I see this poor little pigeon, and it like tried to kind of get away from me when I got up closer to it, but it just kind of like maybe got a foot into the air and fell into a window. And I thought, oh shoot, I need to call that other therapist and make her do this because I'm supposed to see a friend down in Midtown. And
This
she
is
was
the
like
Swedish
the
therapist?
Swedish one, and she
Okay.
was furious with me that I wasn't doing it myself and that now she had to worry about another organism. Um, and then it reminded me about how she had said kind of like troubling things about how cops on the subway like make her feel reassured and sort of like out of sight, out of mind, like
Mm.
which is not my approach to life. Like I want to know like where the suffering is, where the death is, and like be with it as much as possible.
Mm.
So I had to block her um, and like rescue the bird myself.
So you
Um,
permanently blocked the Swedish therapist bird rescuer.
Yeah, I just figured it was best. Like she told me not to contact her again if I wasn't willing to like do more. And I thought I don't know.
Something about object constancy here is, I'm not sure what, but
Yeah,
anyway.
I don't want to analyze her too much because that feels unkind. Um, but yeah, it really made me think about like mm, like what our kind of responsibility is when we come across like human and non-human life that's in crisis, and how responding to that in whatever way we can really changes our relationship to like that terrain. Like Ruth Wilson Gilmore, or is it Gilmore Wilson? Oh God. It's Ruth Wilson Gilmore. Talks about like abolition geographies and like how freedom like is like a physical place. So I've been thinking a lot about how these sort of like interactions where we engage with who's around us and like what's around us, like really inform our sense of possibility and purpose. Um, and I got a nice email that was not a death email from the Wild Bird Fund that said that it was having emaciated poops. So it hadn't eaten in a couple of days, and hopefully it's rehydrated and is able to eat and will someday be released because they even like take the streets that you found it on and then they like do a release there. Yeah.
Okay, so I have questions, and we're
Yeah.
gonna have to back up. And I'm also realizing I used to pride myself on, well, not pride myself. I used to think I liked birds. That I was a bird trainer at a pet store for a couple of years in college, and I used to think I really liked birds. And now you're making me rethink this because you clearly have more of a relational and attachment sort of stance to them than I thought I did. But I definitely want to go back to the dead bird photos because I think you kind of went quickly from there as part of your origin story, but as someone that has a dark sense of humor and a little bit of morbidity too, what who sent the first photo and what motivated you all to just start that and maintain it? Because it seems a little dark and fascinating to me.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure who sent the first photo. Um, we're both gerontologists. We study aging and we think a lot about like society's aversion to reckoning with aging and death. So I think there was something about like, here's this mortality. We're not afraid to look at it and like even feel um, like some affinity and closeness to it. Yeah. But maybe also like a little bit voyeuristic and like a kind of like adolescent fascination too that got satisfied.
Because it's not just that you're looking at it, you're making someone else look at it in a surprising, at least initially, sort of way. Did it start to become like when you get a message notification for this person, you're like, oh, there's a chance this is going to be a dead bird, or
You know, we are in such frequent conversation about other projects that it was really like a delightful, like kind of pause and like, ooh. But there are seasons where there are just so many more of these dead birds, like May, April, June, like
hmm,
especially May and June. You're going to see a lot if you're looking down, which if you have a dog, you do often,
hmm,
with the chicken bones and poop that you're avoiding.
hmm.
Yeah. But there's something really, I think, visually, like kind of stunning about a lot of these like little bird corpses. Like they're almost kind of like flattened and two-dimensional, like a flower press.
Huh,
And they kind of look like fossils.
huh.
Like there's something about kind of like how you want them to be preserved in time.
Hmm,
Like there's some kind of like dignity of like, oh, you were here. Like
hmm,
even if you didn't get to do a lot.
hmm. Memento mori.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And it also makes me want to go back. This isn't about death, but it makes me want to go. You said that the bird group, you went to your first birders group, and that was a whole story. And we've got time. What was the story of the birders group?
Um, I think just like how, I want to be careful with the language that I use for the group, but we all kind of like shared, um, like some kind of like what I think like a lot of other people think is the kind of like peculiar way of like thinking or relating to the world.
Mm,
And there was this way that when someone would see even like the most common bird, like everyone would be like American cardinal, male, and like just kind of like American cardinal, and like echo it.
mm,
Um, and I found that like really soothing to kind of like be in a chorus.
mm.
But so many different types of birds, like an osprey, mourning dove, ruby-throated hummingbird,
Mm.
and just like kind of confining your experience of language to species and like not saying much else except this really annoying like 20 something guy who was talking this woman's ear off, like talking about his like first tech job, which I think he was still at, like the entire time, just like and getting dirty looks from like everyone else, like, no, we're here for the birds. Um,
So I should recalibrate my thinking, and maybe viewers have gone with you the whole time. But when you first started talking about a birders group, my assumption was a living room in Brooklyn or Washington Heights somewhere where people talk about their interest in birds. You're actually just, can you describe where you all physically were?
oh yeah, this is up at Fort Tryon. It's like 191 and Fort Washington. It's the start of the park in New York City where the Cloisters is. And
Okay.
there's a really beautiful heather garden that attracts a lot of pollinators.
Yeah.
But you're also right by the Hudson where there are now bald eagles. So you just get like red-tailed hawks, vultures, all these catbirds and mockingbirds and blue jays. And some of the birders are so enthusiastic and constant that even like the most common birds, like there's a house sparrow that has, I think like a limb that's slightly like altered and like not functional, and they call this like tiny house sparrow Tiny Tim, and like they recognize Tiny Tim, like which in like a huge park you just think like I'll never see that bird again. But if you go enough, like it's the same birds, like they're part of your neighborhood
Hmm.
and they're characters that you can begin build to build a relationship with.
I'm really struck as we're starting to talk how much tenderness is present in sort of how you are thinking about and talking about birds, and how it seems like it's part of, with the exception of perhaps a tech bro, it's part of what the group, how of the group's way of being.
Yeah, well, and I don't know if like when you mentioned um like training a bird, like I had to touch this pigeon and I didn't have to really touch the sparrow. Like I could
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like scoop it up, but the pigeon like we made like skin contact and I was like this is a little too intense. Like
Mm.
you might be something that I feel tenderly toward, but like very much like therapy, like I never want to touch.
Mm.
Like the amount of contact we have is already like so intimate and profound. Like, do we really need that kind of contact?
Mm.
But these Jehovah's Witnesses, I knew they would have hand sanitizer and they were so nice and they gave me like big squirty globs. Um, so I was like relieved on my journey down to the Wild Bird Fund that
Okay,
I
wait.
wasn't going to get some kind of avian flu.
The Jehovah's Witnesses, where are
Yeah.
they coming from?
They were just in the subway. They're there a lot of mornings.
I see. And they have hand sanitizer, totally not connected to birds. It's just.
Right. Yeah. I just had an inkling that like they would be staffed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
Um,
But pigeons actually also don't carry a lot of diseases. Like a lot, like I think it's only like four zoonotic diseases that they can
mm-hmm.
transmit, and like it's pretty rare.
Mm.
Like the idea that pigeons are like dirty is like part of also like the kind of like hysteria around rats.
Mm. So hysteria around rats and hysteria around pigeons. And is it also maybe something here about urban living being degenerate and home to immigrants and disease? There's all sorts of tropes that I
Hmm.
think you're touching on.
Oh yeah, I think it's very like racialized the way we relate to non-human life
Mm.
and like respect its autonomy and dignity and like the way that we frame our relationship to it through coloniality is kind of like pests to deal with.
Mm.
Like the rats that ate through our engine one winter, like I have the utmost respect for them. Like how fucking crafty. Like there were years where they switched from the kind of like rubber insulation on electrical wiring in cars to a soy lecithin.
Hmm.
And the rats were like, oh, a warm engine in the winter with soy? Like,
Sign
I
me
mean,
up.
that's, yeah.
Yeah. So how many birds? How many? And do you? So how many? Couple questions. So how many birds have you rescued? Do you estimate? And are they always babies, or is it a combination of baby and adult birds?
No, it's just been these two, which is like pretty short-lived. Like it's only the last like 3, 4 months.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and I think I'm just like maybe kind of have my eye out in a different way, and also like um, I think there probably were times before where I just did not have a sense that I was resourced enough to do anything, but realizing that you're also not alone, that there's like an entire fund that has like takes in hundreds of birds. You arrive and there's a table with probably like 50 clipboards that are stacked, and each clipboard has like 25 pages of patient intake info where you write down everything you can about how you found the bird,
Mm-hmm.
where it was. Um, but yeah, thinking about like the kind of like instant defeat when you think about your individual capacity. But as soon as you start to think about like the resources that are available collectively and like, how people mobilize together, your sense of possibility really transforms.
How many people are there at this? I mean, can you describe, paint a picture for us of what we're looking at here when you bring a cardboard box?
It's wonderfully mysterious. Like they don't let you inside, and I would never like try to get inside. I think the
Mm.
Swedish therapist said she got in during the pandemic, and she was like, it was wonderful. And for me, that's like, it's like, no, like I need that to be like the secret space where like, all of those initiated into like the Order of the Birds that have like truly dedicated themselves to like the next level of devotion, like get to enter. Um,
So you're not worthy? Nicholas?
Yeah, and I don't want to be.
Okay. Why
I
not?
I don't know, there's something like humbling about just like going to the door and dropping off the bird and being like, this was my part. And they do encourage you to make a donation. Um, which is easy to be like, I already did enough. But you also like you can use that discomfort and guilt to try to encourage other people to make donations too, which
Hmm.
I'll do at the end of this podcast.
Yeah. You sort of are describing this in almost sort of mythical, mythopoetic terms, like the Oracle at Delphi, where the baby bird is sort of the offering to these mysterious inner sanctum high priestesses and priests.
Yeah, I think there's something like deeply spiritual about like disrupting the flow of your day and like finding time to accommodate um like an act of care, especially one that like I don't know, like now I feel familiar with, but like the journey suddenly takes on a kind of like adventure element. And I think like just the way I was kind of primed and charged to notice the other person with a box that could have a bird and the Jehovah's Witnesses who could have hand sanitizer. Um, yeah, it really like puts you in a new um, position of relating to not just your neighborhood, but like the kind of like journey through the city.
The previous podcast episode, which you may or may not have, well, I know you haven't had a chance to see it yet because it hasn't dropped, but it's Molly Merson talking about weightlifting. And one of the things I mentioned to her when I read her paper was after reading about her lifting odd objects, I went out into the world and suddenly the world looked different. Everything was an object that I saw differently as how would one move this? How does one solve this problem? And you're actually taking me to a similar place where, the idea of all of these birds, all of this life, all of this tenderness and reverence for objects that is around us in an urban setting or even in a nature setting is something I think that you've described kind of being tuned into in a way that I am not.
That's a really nice way of seeing it and putting words to it. And this is where I'm kind of excited to draw some connections to abolition. I'm reading this book talking about abolition, a police-free world as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Sonali Kolkater, and its interviews with, let's see, Ruth Wilson Gilmore's here, Andrea Ritchie, uh, Dylan Rodriguez. There's a few people.
Mm.
Um, but the foreword by Robin D.G. Kelly has this quote that blew me away. Let's see. Um, he got it from Shaka Nzinga's A Disjointed Search for the Will to Live.
Mm.
Um, and basically, it's about seeing the world as possibility from the place of confinement.
Hmm.
And it really resonates with some of the things that Lara Shihas said about being in tune with like the textures of life. Um, the music teacher in Gaza who harmonized with the drone and had kids turning an instrument of death into something that they could make music with and
Mm.
affirming their
Mm.
existence. Um, like I think there are so many moments where like what I'm thinking of as autistic relationality, a way of like really feeling like where our bodies are in time and space in relation to each other and to non-human life. Um, like in all the ways that these carceral logics of pathologization, criminalization, like try to confine our subjectivity and confine us to kind of like a care austerity model where we only have so much to give and care work is seen as kind of a more abject like sanitation effort than like a profoundly spiritual way of engaging with each other.
Well, and the other thing about the care model you're describing is it's also inherently a power polemic, right? You know, the poor people in Gaza who are victims, rather than people that are actually engaging and snatching life out of oppression, that continue to live and experience joy despite our efforts, and that's a very different model than the carer cared for sort of model.
Hmm.
And you know, I'm trying. There's so many places like we could go with this, and it. I guess I'm thinking about the other thing we talked about, which was your interest in virtual birds, and I want to make sure we spend some time on that because for folks on the podcast, Nicholas isn't just engaged with birds that are carceral, spiritual, organic birds. There are also virtual birds.
Oh yeah, it feels kind of like silly. It was definitely like the algorithm had enough like juice to tap into a kind of nostalgia for virtual pets.
Hmm.
But there's this app Finch that has burbs, BIRB, and you have a burb and you have tasks during the day that you set, and that it helps kind of set you up with like basic things about drinking water, like not doom scrolling in bed.
Hmm.
Um, you can put things about relating to people in your life, like hug someone, give someone a compliment, like things that like when you're so kind of caught up in like the pain and frustration of watching an authoritarian takeover and the power consolidation that we see, that like remind you that like your physical organism and the people around you like deserve attention and you might be neglecting them. Um,
I just remembered to breathe when you said
oh, yeah, they have a lot of breathing exercises. Um, so yeah, I guess for the last, it was about the same time as the house sparrow. Like I downloaded this app and like sometimes I don't really engage with it much, but it's also just such a great alternative to like when you find yourself opening up an app like your email or Instagram or the New York Times, and you find yourself like doing it on repeat, and you're like, wait, I was just here.
that.
Like that's a really good time to introduce like another app for you to go to. Like even if it's like that has like something that's going to like be checking in on you a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so, how does Burb work? Like as a virtual pet or a virtual bird?
Yeah,
And do you want to interrogate the concept of pet, because that I guess could also be a little problematic.
yeah, it really doesn't feel so much like a pet because the burb doesn't ask anything of you for it. Like it is nourished by you taking care of yourself.
Mm.
So, like you can send it on like little adventures. Um, but like you taking care of yourself, I think, I mean, of course, it's like a capitalist model. Like you get like, I don't know, gems or something to like spend at the burb store and you can like dress
What?
it up. But I also found out that you could get some of the accessibility tools, like canes and
Hmm.
hearing aids, and then you could sell those and you could buy other stuff. So there was like a nice way of also like thinking about, I don't know, like ways that, like even like because capitalism is such a like kind of violent process of trying to negotiate survival, even when we have these innocuous games, like there's still some part of us that like wants to see if we can game the system.
Hmm.
And then you can spend like 15,000 of these gems on like a little like tiny teddy bear for your burb.
Hmm.
Like it's like almost like they have like a like luxury item that you can like save up for and buy. And they're usually like not that cute.
Hmm.
But I don't know. It's like a good place to channel some of that like I don't know, kind of like fussy energy that you might want to like devote to a garden.
And so, what does your burb have for outfits and accessories?
Like, what does my burb not have? Um, there's like a clamshell bikini. Um,
Oh my.
there's like little like owl pajamas and like other animal pajamas that it can like wear like another animal's kind of like skin. Um, really crazy shoes, umbrellas, boba. I don't know. This burb has a lot. And they also have micro pets, which you hatch after 7 days of like doing an activity that you've set out to do. So they have like their own little thing that they're set up with. So it's like care, relationship, like everyone needs a doll, like all the way down.
I'm laughing, but I'm also sort of a little self conscious of that because I think that I think that these are parts of ourselves that are not easily accessed in an everyday capitalist or urban capitalist, in your case, model. And it's easy to become a little cynical or hardened. Especially, you've talked about the kind of the exaggerated uptick in authoritarianism and that we're living through. And so, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, wow, this is an antidote to that, a vulnerability and an assertion of tenderness.
Maybe, but I think there are also times that like I'm just looking for a digital distraction and it doesn't actually override my cynicism.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, God, this sucks. And then I like take a walk and I'm not on my phone and I see a
Mm-hmm.
bird.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's some like relationship to like also like putting the phone down, like
Mm-hmm.
it being like in some kind of like liminal space that helps me like think about my usage and how it's also using me.
Mm-hmm. That's something else Molly talked a lot about, which is using the object and the object using us.
Mhm.
Let's go back to real birds, and maybe we're talking about using the object and the object, in this case, the bird using you. But when you described, there was one time you described a bird that was sort of lying there looking up at the sky. And maybe this was my cynicism, but I was wondering, how do you know if you're projecting or not? How much of this is anthropomorphizing birds, and does that matter?
Um, yeah, I don't think it totally matters. And I would also say that like the way that I think about projection, it's not just like I'm putting my narcissistic fantasy on you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm stepping into a transferential field. And if we're both like good and trust each other, I'm picking up on something you're putting down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's good to have that kind of like skepticism. Like, am I so out of touch with the ways that I can't fly that I need to like find these little birds and get them off the ground? And there was some part of me that was relieved when they were like, no, this is emaciation poop. And I was like, okay, I'm not just crazy and didn't just like terrorize some poor pigeon because it was really trying to get away from me. It found like a row of trash cans that I hadn't seen and like dove between them. So I had to like go behind these like really stinky trash cans and like pull out this bird that was like kind of fighting with me.
Mm. And you're like, I'm doing this for your own good.
Yeah, and then this mom stopped and she got like her kids were like, "What's going on?" And she like got the box and held it for me and kind of like wrestled it in there.
Mm.
Yeah. But it's yeah, it struck me that it wasn't like an easy it was like a pretty adrenalizing act. Um, and I think if we really want to like project our fantasies in a way that like they don't like kind of flat back at us, like we need to find kind of like more docile, controllable things.
Mm.
Or at least that's my fantasy.
Say more docile, controllable things for what purpose?
Like if we really want to like disavow what we're feeling,
Mm.
because I think there was a way that like I was probably feeling like a similar kind of helplessness that
Mm,
like compelled me to meet the bird's helplessness too.
mm,
And that it wasn't just this like because it did have some fight and I do have some fight, it also like connected us in this way that it wasn't just like me in this like omnipotent position
mm,
where I'm like, ah, bird, I've given you safety because I am safety.
mm,
Like I felt like our survival was like very connected in some of those moments.
mm. I'm thinking a little bit about, and I mean, you probably noticed I've used the term tender and tenderness a lot today. And I'm thinking about sort of Sandor Ferenczi here and that concept of tenderness. And, um, and I'm also wondering about the connection between baby birds and abolitionism because you've brought them up. So as it's been percolating, have you thought of any links that you are explicitly kind of meaning when you talk about abolitionism that might connect to baby birds?
Mm. I mean, I wonder if that's like some of the kind of confusion about like what a nest is.
Hmm.
Like it's a thing that we've got to leave, but if you don't have the resources to do so, it's also kind of a place of confinement. So meeting them outside of the nest, like they're already like in some kind of space where they're exploring possibility
Hmm.
beyond a confine. But I think birds like, I don't know, like Maya Angelou, like the bird is a compelling um, object for for freedom.
Hmm. I'm so thinking now, as you've talked about that, about so many of my patients that are emerging adults that are really stuck. Well, the perception of them is that they're really stuck, and it's about sort of what is a nest and how do we convince people that they have to leave it? Who said they had to leave the nest? Like who says someone has to leave the nest, and what's wrong if someone doesn't?
Well, and that imperative is just a kind of other nest, like the
Right.
psychiatrization of like the developmental model,
Mm-hmm.
like is just another place to confine you and tell you like how you should be inhabiting space.
Yeah. So you did say something earlier about freedoms of physical place. Can you talk about that? And I don't know if you can connect it to the birds, but what does that mean? Freedom is a physical space, physical
Um,
place.
I was just reading this the other night, like this interview with Gilmore, um, and her concept about abolition geographies. Um, but I think it's about like how when you're challenging the way that subjects, human and non-human, are confined and under attack, and you're building relationships, like you start to experience the geography around you in a very different way.
Hmm.
And that, like, in a lot of ways, liberalism has tricked us into thinking that we can only enjoy freedoms if certain institutional spaces like can withstand like pressure from attacks outside. But we're seeing like how quickly those just collapse. Like the things that persist are much more part of what Fred Moten talks about, like as the undercommons, um, and places that like where there's mutual aid networks and it's a lot less visible and a lot less part of like the prestige vehicle and the legitimacy that like people and institutions endow upon each other to gain
Hmm.
authority.
Would you consider the place you brought the baby birds? Would you consider that a form of undercommons, or is it something different?
Um, I feel like I don't know the undercommons enough to talk about like where that distinction is, but I I'm thinking about like where people find each other, and often like even within like suppressive institutional spaces, like there's some kind of like rolling of the eyes or sideways glance that happens in sync where you find someone else who isn't buying it with you, and that
Mm.
relationship, you take it outside of that space and you form new spaces together. So maybe it's like it's a place where that's can begin to happen for people.
Now you've got me thinking about us and how we sort of met. Like, you don't get more profane and institutional than a convention center lobby. But think about all the walking around and talking we did, and how, and yet I want to say, I know this is drifting off burst for a minute. That space, that sort of sterile kind of modernist space, is really bound up in my recollections of deepening connection with you and getting to know you better. Like, it was. I don't know if you had an experience similar to that, but it was, there's something about convention centers and Nicholas now in my
Yeah,
world.
I like love and hate them, which I heard someone, Hortense Spillers, was talking about how she has a love-hate relationship with psychoanalysis. And
Mm.
I was like, is there any other kind of relationship to have? Like, that's like the most psychoanalytic relationship you could have with psychoanalysis. Um, and I think similarly, like with some of these conferences, it's like the unconferencing that happens
Mm.
simultaneously. Like, we almost like need some of the institutional structure to be there to symbolize like how authority functions, and then to see like who's willing to transgress that and to step outside of it, and who can do it like within such close proximity, but know when you're smuggling in something like more radical and human and vulnerable and
Mm.
real.
Speaking of radical, vulnerable, and real, um, have you talked with any of your colleagues and patients about this interest of rescuing baby birds and or finch, other than here, and have there been risks or vulnerabilities that come from sharing it?
Yeah, it's something that I don't I don't disclose much with patients. I think there's one person in particular who engages with their environment in a similar way. And because of how language functions between us, it doesn't really matter who's like telling the story. It's like stories just need to keep happening. Um, but with students, yeah, I think there's a way that it's like a nice way of reminding them that life exists outside of the institution. Um, and a lot of them are birders, a lot of them are runners. Um, and like suddenly, like we realize that like that's just a place where we're doing like part of the work. I also try to do as many field trips as I can. We were just at the Museum of the City of New York, which is just wonderful. And they have this Activists of New York section that's great on the second floor. But the fourth floor exhibit is all devoted to dance, where you can learn different dance styles from different eras in
Huh.
New York. And then there's a huge dance floor, and you can put records on, and it like suddenly like transforms the lights, the music, the images that are being projected,
Mm.
um, and getting people to do things through spaces that they didn't know they were supposed to do, like getting them to inhabit like different voices and bring different parts of self. I think that's like also like kind of clinically like we're trying to bring as many kind of parts of self out to play and to be in conversation with each other as possible. Um, yeah.
As you said that, I was associating it to the baby bird in a cardboard box being brought somewhere, like parts of the self. Um,
It's a kind of terrifying thing.
Tell me more. I'm putting a wall up. Why is it terrifying?
Well, there's some part of it that's nice that like the box is closed, like you can't see all of the light or hear all the sound. But I'm just thinking about like the rocking of the subway,
Hmm.
and like what it kind of feels like to be shuttled through space and have like very little control, which is actually like what's happening all the time. Like it's a reason I really like planetariums and
Mm,
astronomy, like thinking about how we're always like we're not like static. Like you can sit as still as you want to, but you're still like hurtling through space, and it's not just like an even circle. Like it's um, elliptical and like moving through the galaxy,
mm.
and yeah, I
And
don't
now
know if that.
you're sort of reminding me of Hortense Spiller's writing on the Middle Passage, which is a very different experience um, of oppression and the imagined subjectivity of the person in that sort of Middle Passage.
Mm.
Um, so I think I can access the terrifying there. What I know we're kind of coming to our at the end of the time we have for our interview, but so I wanted to ask you a couple things. One is for the goal for listeners is to have different folks share what sort of playful or quirky things they do to subvert living in this particular moment. And I'm wondering what advice you'd give listeners who maybe don't have something that you've currently described. Like how can folks cultivate a playful subversion in their life, especially if they're feeling stuck or guilty about doing that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a little bit of what I'm trying to build through thinking about crone pedagogies and what it can be. And like this figure of Baba Yaga who kind of decides on a whim if she's going to hurt or help you,
Mm,
and how much that relates to Api Sakatopoulos' exigent sadism.
mm,
Like, there's a way that, like, liberalism really wants us to perform care in such a gentle way where we can like absorb whatever violence and be completely disavow like what kind of violence we're participating in and complicit with,
mm-hmm,
as long as we're like gentle about it. um, but that um, like if we're really going to talk about the violence of colonialism and settler colonialism, we have to go to places where we're unsettled and uncomfortable. And I think play is so much of a safer space to begin to do something so risky.
mm-hmm.
Um, because you have like a little bit of like distance, like a little bit of like reflective space, um, mm, to like step back from it. Because it's really intense work.
Well, it also has rules, right? Play's got rules, and rules can be fascistic, but they can also be containing or provide a structure for freedom. Um,
Well, there's some sense that like you're playing.
mm-hmm,
And so I think that that's kind of if I had to like distill a piece of advice, it would be like give other people clues that you're playing. Um, but I also, at the same time as I'm saying this, think about how fascists often like put on their hurt in a very like kind of playful, mocking way, um, and like their attacks on like truth and reality, like they don't care if you take it seriously. Like you have to take it seriously, but I don't know. Yeah, I think there are ways of speaking and dressing and also moving your body in space and also talking about the confines that you're in, like what the institution has um, told you is expected of you, and like reckoning with like how that confines a lot of what you can say and feel or what parts of you are welcome. That's a There are ways to kind of signal that, and then you can start to do some of the more radical play. That's part of the thinking and feeling you need to do for the learning and healing.
what were there any pieces of your bird experience that you didn't get a chance to talk about today?
No, I think I rattled it off. I'm sorry.
No, you didn't rattle it off. That was good. But let's take a look. I'm going to share screen and take a look at the. You wanted us to consider, because you're doing this for fun and for free, a non-profit or two if folks want to donate. And the first one that I've got up is something called Crips for eSIMs for Gaza. So can you explain it for me?
Um, yeah, I don't know so much about Crips for eSIMs,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a collaboration between Alice Wong and others, and it's part of the Disability Visibility Project. Um, but one way to materially support people in Gaza is to give them connection to each other in the outside world, and
Yep.
eSIMs are a way to do that.
Yep.
And right now it routes you from the Crips for eSIMs for Crips for eSIMs for Gaza.org to the Chuffed platform.
Okay.
I think a lot of people like might not be familiar with Chuffed because part of our like neoliberal like organization of care has been like so kind of commodified through like GoFundMe
Mm-hmm.
like as like the platform, but Chuffed isn't a platform that's allowing people, especially from Gaza, to organize where like need is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
I'm glad you brought this one up as a nonprofit, and I'm glad you've made us aware of it because one of the things that I've become aware of is how Palestine is actually kept at a 2G data and network level, which and so for those of you who use your phone, we have 5G, and imagine doing the things one needs to do to be a digital citizen with such a reduced bandwidth, and even imagine not having access to the internet. So thank you for sharing that particular one. And then I'm going to do the other one, which is I think more in keeping with your vibe today, which is the Wild Bird Fund. And what can you tell us about this one?
You know, I wish I could say more, but I think part of me is also like still like just going to the door and then I have no idea like what really goes on
Mm-hmm.
behind it. Their Instagram features like some of that work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, you can help the Wild Bird Fund because I think they rely on a lot of donations because of the medical supplies and the veterinary services that they provide. Um, yeah, even though it's a volunteer-led effort, it's still very costly to maintain their physical space and the care that they provide the birds.
And is this the place that you took your birds to?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the mysterious inner sanctum. This is that you were describing. This is one of the ways people can support that work.
Yeah.
Nicholas, thank you so much for being so generous with your time, and I really appreciate your modeling how playfulness can be not just not just subversive, but it can be tender, it can be vulnerable. You shared a very unique and personal and thoughtful way of moving through the world here and noticing life, which has left me a little humbled. And I'm going to walk out. I live on Nantucket, and there are plenty of birds and wildlife here, and I need to pay more attention to them. And thank you for that.
Well, thank you for having me. And I would just add that I hope I've also been like appropriately fussy because I think sometimes like tenderness and care like get kind of performed or illustrated in a way that like doesn't allow space for how like fussy we are too, like with tech bros or like therapist bird ladies who like start to like rattle us. Um, yeah.
We can have you on for a future episode, and you can be more and more fussy. But I think you were just fine.
Excellent. Okay.